Now, in the fictional series, their condo was actually in a floating city in the sky. So we're not necessarily counting that. We're going to say that the underlying architecture and foundation was already built, right? If you're trying to include that, you're talking about lots of different costs, lots of different technical and scientific hurdles that you're trying to get past, right? A floating city or floating living space, building, whatever you want to call it. There is not really anything in nature because we just copy things from nature. Like an airplane is really based upon birds. You know, we look at things that already exist and we copy them and change them, right? We don't necessarily come up with things completely on our own. We're remaking and redoing things that we have seen, and we're only using materials that have already been provided within the universe. We're not creating anything new. There's nothing new under the sun, right? We're rearranging things in a certain way. The house that you have is most likely rearranged using pieces of wood, cement, other things that are being used to build your stick built out if you have one of those. We're rearranging things from the earth, from our environment, and putting them together, right? We as humans to make our houses. Birds, they gather things, they gather twigs and other things, and they make their nest. We're human, we're different. We build things that are way more complicated, but we are all still using only what we have been given and provided within the universe, especially as we continue to talk about things that will go perhaps beyond the boundaries. Anyway, that kind of foundation of a floating city, a floating building, even a hummingbird, which appears to us to hover, is really just moving very, very fast. Their wings are moving very fast, and our eyes can't really keep up. That's why you see some insects, they appear to hop or move along or almost like jump from one place to another as if they're being teleported through space and time. They're just going really fast, and our eyes can't keep up to that. So it just looks like they're popping from one place to another, which is very similar to a hummingbird. But even a hummingbird will move around. It has to go rest. It has to eat, drink water, things along those lines, right? Clouds are up in the sky, but even they move. They form and then they dissipate. They're not permanently in the atmosphere, in the sky. So that kind of thing is going to be difficult to maintain. The rockets that we have, we basically blow things up, right? Because that's how you get enough energy to get past Earth's gravity and then get out into space. So you're trying to make a architecture, a building that's going to float in the atmosphere. Now, there are several things that are happening. There's that wind shear, there's atmospheric pressure, there's magnetic fields, there's all kind of things that are happening, not to mention those clouds that we talked about, the rain, the weather, all of those things that are now going to move that thing about. In an airplane, you can see that from turbulence, you can see that from other things that are happening, and that is with an airplane that has not only an engine, which again, we're taking fuel and we're burning it, we're setting it on fire in effect, that give us enough thrust, enough power to even get it up into the air in the first place. Now, the advantage of an airplane, much like a bird, is that it has lift with the wings, which is just a basics of the atmosphere on Earth. But is using that lift in order to stay up in the air with the engines, of course, right? So once it's in motion, it stays in motion. It can stay up in the air for a little while, right? But if you cut the engines off, you're now going to start, you still have some momentum, you still have some time, but now even that lift that's being provided by the wings is not enough because we're not a bird and we're not constantly flapping our wings in an airplane. right? It provides some amount of lift, but not enough to keep you up in the air. Let's look at, say, a helicopter. A helicopter has those spinning blades, which is again using that lift mechanic of the atmosphere of Earth to help it to lift up, but it also has an engine, right? And even a helicopter, if it kind of hovers for a little while, it only does that for a little while. And you have to be constantly burning fuel to keep a helicopter up and going. And how often does it just sit there without also moving to the left, to the right, up or down, right? So there's all these kind of considerations that you would have with an actual floating building, floating city, trying to maintain that. The kind of power that you would need was now also going to limit you, because the power you need is also going to be part of the weight of lifting the whole entire thing, right? With rockets, we have all of this fuel, and we burn that fuel off, and then we jettison those rockets, right? They come off, right? After they spin all that fuel to get it. Now, we're not trying to get all the way into space, so we don't have to worry about that. You know, how high in the sky is it, right? So maintaining that constant elevation, that constant kind of hover, is going to require lots of power, and you're going to need more power the heavier that it is. And that's before you even start adding people or animals, right, into a living space, whether it be circular or not, right? So that kind of constant power is going to require constant fuel of one word or another. Are you using jet fuel? You're using that kind of rocket fuel? That means you're going to have to constantly resupply that floating building over and over again. Or are you perhaps using nuclear power, which would probably be the best, although, that's going to be heavy. That's going to add weight to your floating building. If you perhaps had some sort of wireless power generation, you could have a central station. We'll talk about that later. When we talk about other places, you might be able to wirelessly get energy or power to your floating city. Maybe have a central hub that's generating the power and then wirelessly transporting that, which that is conceptual. I don't know how far along, places like NASA have gotten to actually getting that done, but that is one possibility. Otherwise, you're going to have power generation within the floating city, floating building itself, which is going to make it heavier, right? All of that kind of apparatus, that kind of buildup is going to be very expensive, as you could imagine. Nuclear power plants, although you may not need the full one, they're going to be millions, if not billions. But a lot of that is because of the regulatory nature of it. It's not just building the nuclear reactor itself. It's all the things and loopholes you have to go through in order to get the government to approve you. Now, if you're up in the sky, are you no longer bound by a government? Interesting, right? Who owns that? Is that under a nation? Is it if it's over, say, South Carolina? Is that South Carolina land? They're going to say that because land, if you own the land and it's not a townhome or a condominium, if you actually own the real property, that includes the air above it and the ground all the way down. Right? That is the definition of land, at least in South Carolina, right? So you would technically own the airspace, although I'm sure the United States military would have something to say about that. The FAA also governs that, even though it's your airspace that you own, they are still able to govern that, right? So if we put this floating building, this floating city outside the jurisdiction of a nation, do you not have to pay taxes? Are you not bound by a regulatory agency? That might make that nuclear power plant more feasible, at least cost less, and take less time, right? If you're talking about wireless power generation, then you're having all that R&D in order to get that going and moving, and then you're going to have to transport that. And again, because you are needing this on a constant basis. Everything in the universe, entropy, is trying to break down and go back to its original state. That's kind of the recycling nature of the Earth. The Earth recycles things all the time. Yeah, that's great. But also that's why things kind of break down. So all of those components that you have in your floating city, floating building are constantly being pulled by entropy, right? And constantly, that's why things break down. Also, they're being used and they're being worn over time, right? Right? So that's also why things start to break down over time. So in order to keep you flying, hovering at all times, you're going to need energy at all times, fuel at all times, and all the systems need to be working. Not at 100%. What if you get 99%? So what's going to happen? Are you going to start to slip now? Is only one part of your building going to slip now? Right? Also, you're trying to maintain a level space at all times to make it appear as if you are on land. That's also going to be difficult, right? Because of all those other factors that we talked about. When you're in the atmosphere, you have that wind shear, the pressure, all those other things. We're probably going to use magnetic steel or metal components, and you have the magnetic fields of the Earth that are going to affect that. All kinds of things going on. Also, you're higher up, right? So do you need oxygen? Right? How high are you? People have problems just going to Denver, Colorado, to the United States sometimes. And that's on land. So how high are you going to make it? All these interesting questions. Very expensive. Again, if you're going the nuclear power route, that's just for power generation. We're not talking about actually building the engines itself that keep it floating however you're doing that, right? Or are we just burning rocket fuel the whole time? And then constantly resupplying, right? This kind of power generation, forget solar, especially because we're in the atmosphere. That's not going to generate enough. Wind, forget about it. If windmills works, we've been using windmills the whole time. There's a reason we moved away from windmills. They don't give us enough. And even the modern ones, watch out for those birds because they're being slaughtering lots of birds along the way, right? It takes so much real estate in order to get a windmill up and going to generate the kind of power that we need. We need lots of power to do the things that we're talking about. And I'm just talking about normal things on planet, on Earth, to say nothing about a floating city, a floating building, right? So, George and Jane's Futuristic Condo. There you have it.